What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I am Ryan Thomas, your host for tonight's episode of the Thomas Take. I covered a lot of stuff. I'm not even going to go through the laundry list of stuff that I covered tonight. I want you guys to tune in. You can follow it on the Facebook page. You can like the Facebook page first. That would be great. You can also click out of the page once you like it. Once you're done listening to the show, you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com, type in the search bar, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, and you will see my page. Click subscribe. You will have access to every single episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Short or long episodes, every little segment that I've ever had on the show. So, another part down of the show, I went through 3 parts, 4 parts. This is the final part of today's show, and I want to talk about, in closing, Aaron Hernandez. Obviously, this was a polarizing story. The fact that Hernandez made the decisions that he did that led to the moments that we had heard of a few days ago, where Aaron Hernandez had committed suicide in his jail cell. Just a mere days after he was acquitted of a double murder while still serving the life sentence of the murder of Odin Lloyd. So, this is where things are tough because obviously we as sports fans see these players in this extraterrestrial light, when in actuality they are just like you and me. They make mistakes. They do things wrong. Some of them are sick human beings. Some of them have real problems. Obviously, first guy that comes to mind that I'm talking about right now is Aaron Hernandez. But along the history of football, there have been guys that have had plenty of problems. Mike Vick is one of those guys. Bill Romanowski is one of those guys. Ricky Williams was thought to be a head case for quite some time. There's a laundry list. I won't really say Ricky Williams is a bad person, or he didn't do any of the things that Vic or Hernandez did, obviously. But the analogy that with those 3 players, Ricky Williams, Mike Vick, and Aaron Hernandez, they had it all, and they threw it away for what is perceived by the fans to be ridiculous, and especially in the case of Vic and Hernandez. But at the time, in the case of Ricky Williams, people didn't understand why this guy would choose marijuana over being an NFL running back, and that's what he did. Mike Vick wanted to live 2 lives, wanted to live the life of a franchise quarterback, wanted to live the life of a bad news kennel owner. Basically, the operation was all through him. Aaron Hernandez always wanted to live the life of a gangster. That was something that was notoriously said about him as he was growing up. During his days in Florida, he was in several instances, and during his days in high school, where his brother was the high school quarterback of their team. His brother was known as the good one. Aaron was known as the bad one. And that's sad to know that there was that distinction for him that young. This kid had real problems as a kid, and he grew up with even worse problems, obviously. So athletic as any tight end that I have ever seen, outside of the Tony G's and the Robert Gronkowski's and Shannon Sharps, Aaron Hernandez was right there with the guys that I have seen play. And he was a remarkable athlete. So for me as a fan to watch him play at the level that he did for as long as he did, for the time that he did, with Rob Gronkowski being one of the most prolific tight end duos in NFL history, obviously hearing about the news of his murders was very disturbing. Wondering how could this guy put himself in this situation, with all the money that he had, with all the talent that he had, with the resources that he had of people around him. You're talking about a guy that had Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft at his disposal, at his beck and call, and he just threw that away. And that is really hard for a fan, or for anyone, for not even just a sports fan, but for anyone to understand why someone would throw that away. But in actuality, Aaron Hernandez wanted to be a gangster more than he did an NFL football player. That was his dream. That was what he really wanted to do. But football was just a way out, and a way out of his town, a way for him to expand his wannabe lifestyle of being a gangster. And I found it to be very interesting that, he was living this double life while on the team, and nobody knew about it. Some people say that that's hard to believe. They find it hard to believe that the Patriots teammates didn't know, but they didn't know. That nobody. When someone is hanging out with the wrong crowd. That guy that he's hanging out with might not be the best guy for him, but you would never know when someone is basically a serial killer, and that's what he was. You're always comparing You're always comparing history to the current situation, and obviously when they talk about Aaron Hernandez, they talk about O.J. Simpson. Two very different circumstances. The O.J. thing was way after his playing days. It was a marriage disagreement where his wife was murdered, and the man that the wife was seeing was also murdered. This was Aaron Hernandez's brother-in-law. So this guy was the brother of Aaron Hernandez's wife, and Aaron Hernandez apparently murdered Odin Lloyd due to the fact that Lloyd had spilled a drink on him in a bar. So this was a serious sociopath and psychopath that had very real problems. And it dated back to his days in Florida, as it was talked about by me and Dan Schalk on Facebook. Dan brought up the point that I was dying to bring up on Facebook, but I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus and throw shade on Urban Meyer. But Urban Meyer covered things up for Aaron Hernandez while Hernandez was in Florida. There was cases of Aaron Hernandez being involved in shootings in grocery stores and shoe stores and things like that Urban Meyer completely covered it up. So this is a classic case of a guy being athletically talented but not morally right in the head, and the coaches taking advantage of this kid. And that isn't an excuse. I'm not defending Aaron Hernandez. The guy was a sick human being, to say the least. But that definitely lit some gasoline on his psychopathic ways. Just condoning it constantly led to what we now know him as a murderer, a convicted felon, and a man that felt the need to commit suicide in his cell, knowing that he would spend the rest of his life in jail. He knew what his future held for him, and he committed suicide because of it. Now, I read something as recent as today that said that Hernandez committed suicide because the state of Massachusetts has a law in which money can be frozen from a prisoner when he's tried for a crime and he's exonerated. I don't know any of that. I knew that I was not willing to go as far as saying that he was murdered in his prison cell. The only person that really thought that was Aaron Hernandez's agent, and he got paid to say things like that. So I didn't really agree with that fact. I assumed that Aaron Hernandez, in actuality, did kill himself. I never once stated that he didn't. I know for a fact I know things about prisons more than other people because my dad has been a corrections officer for 30 years. And when someone is in a cell and they know that they're going to be all alone for the rest of their life, that would be enough for me to definitely question whether I want to be around anymore. And that was the case. And it finally really came to fruition with Aaron Hernandez. The real heartbreak part of this part, or not the part of the part of the story, I should say. The real heartbreak is the fact that Aaron Hernandez had a 4-year-old daughter, and he chose to not be in her life whatsoever. He made that decision that, hey, I'm going to punch out now. She's better off without me, and maybe she is, but just the fact that daughter has to know that he made that decision, that's very, very hard. Very, very hard for anybody to go through. Whether their father was not right or not, the fact that other people do suffer for the mistakes of others because of the fact that they care about that person. And, Aaron Hernandez had a family. He had a brother that was a impactful, citizen in the town that they lived in Connecticut. He's the former high school quarterback star that got hurt, that went back to be the high school football coach, impact the players, where Aaron Hernandez was a standout athlete that went into the University of Florida and won a national championship and went to the New England Patriots and went to a Super Bowl and scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, and then gets convicted of this murder that was so heinous and egregious and disgusting that you don't even know what to believe when you are watching these players. You don't know what type of people they are. And it's really sad that this is a story that had this ending. It's the whole story, the last 5 years that it has taken place, has been one that has really really disturbed me on a lot of levels, because I admire these guys, because I admire athletics in general. I admire athletes, and it's really hard when your judgment is skewed. You feel like you've been tricked. Like I thought, man, I like Aaron Hernandez. He was on my fantasy teams. Thought he had a real bright future. He would have been on the last year of his contract with the New England Patriots had this not happened, and definitely would have been one of the best tight ends in NFL history, along with Rob Gronkowski. I definitely think he would have had a huge contribution to the Patriots, before this all happened. And the fact that it did, it's disturbing. You wonder who's next. What player is going to do something crazy next? It has that Chris Benoit-like feel to it. It's very disturbing what some of these guys are capable of, based on the fact that they've had all this talent, this God-given talent, and they have the world in the palm of their hands with all the money that they make. I read a report stating that Hernandez had spent over $750,000 on guns. What would a 23, 24-year-old guy have a need to spend that much money on guns for? This guy was a gang member for his whole life, and it wasn't because they wanted him to be in the gang. It was because he put his nose in the gang. So those are the guys that gang members do not like, or the guys that try to pretend like they came from the rough streets when Aaron Hernandez, in fact, did not. So there's so many layers to this story that we'll never understand. There's so many layers to these NFL players that we'll never know about. And in some cases we will, in the case of Cyrus Kouandjou, and in the case of Aaron Hernandez, and in the case of OJ and Mike Vick, and all these players that have really let a lot of people down. And obviously Aaron Hernandez was the worst of them all, given the recent track record. But it's very sad to know that somebody was, going to bed at night. A kid was probably going to bed at night, and he had a poster of Aaron Hernandez on his wall. I'm sure that there was kids out there that admired him. I thought he was a great player. I thought he was a decent guy too, and we were so wrong. And I feel for his family. I feel for the Patriots organization, to be honest with you, because Robert Kraft had to go testify. Bill Belichick had to make an appearance in court. That was very, very hard to watch when dating back a couple years ago when I watched Robert Kraft step into the court. That had to be probably one of the saddest things I've ever seen pertaining to sports and real life. So, just a sad story. And, to give my final take on it, hopefully, this is a learning lesson to a lot of young kids out there that just because you're great at football does not mean you can do whatever you want. Take care.